want to be hurt, ask to be hurt, like to be raped, get sexual pleasure from sexual violence. And even when a woman is covered in filth, we're supposed to believe that her speech is that she likes it and she wants more of it. The reality for women in this society is that pornography creates silence for women. The pornographers silence women. Our bodies are their language. Their speech is made out of our exploitation, our subservience, our injury, and our pain, and they can't say anything without hurting us. And when you protect them, you protect only their right to exploit and hurt us. Pornography is a civil rights issue for women because pornography sexualizes inequality, because it turns women into subhuman creatures. Pornography is a civil rights issue for women because it is the systematic exploitation of a group of people because of a condition of birth. Pornography creates bigotry and hostility and aggression towards all women, targets all women without exception. Pornography is the suppression of us through sexual exploitation and abuse so that we have no real means to achieve civil equality. And the issue here is simple. It is not complex. People are being hurt, and you can help them or you can help those who are hurting them. We need civil rights legislation that recognizes pornography as a violation of the civil rights of women. We need it because civil rights legislation recognizes the fact that the harm here is to human beings. We need that recognition. We need civil rights legislation because it puts the power to act in the hands of the people who have been forced into pornographized powerlessness. And that's a special kind of powerlessness. That's a powerlessness that is supposed to be a form of sexual pleasure. We need civil rights legislation because only those to whom it has happened know what has happened. They're the people who are the experts. They have the knowledge. They know what has happened, how it's happened. Only they can really articulate from beginning to end the reality of pornography as a human rights injury. We need civil rights legislation because it gives us something back after what the pornographers have taken from us. The motivation to fight back keeps people alive. People need it for their dignity, for their ability to continue to exist as citizens in a country that needs their creativity and needs their presence and needs the existence that has been taken from them by the pornographers. We need civil rights legislation because as social policy, it says to a population of people that they have human worth. They have human worth. That this society recognizes that they have human worth. We need it because it's the only legislative remedy thus far that is drawn narrowly enough to confront the human rights issues for people who are being exploited and discriminated against without becoming an instrument of police power to suppress real expression. We need the civil rights legislation because the process of civil discovery is a very important one and will give us a great deal of information for potential criminal prosecutions against organized crime and prosecutors. And I ask you to look at the example of the Southern Poverty Law Center and their Klan Watch project where they have used civil suits to get criminal indictments against the Klan. And finally, we need civil rights legislation because the only really dirty word in this society is the word women. And a civil rights approach says that this society repudiates the brutalization of women. We are against obscenity laws. We don't want them. And I want you to understand why, whether you end up agreeing with it or not. Number one, the pornographers use them as part of their formula for making pornography. All they need to do is to provide some literary, artistic, political, or scientific value, and they can hang women from the rafters as long as they manage to meet that formula. It doesn't matter what they do to women. And in the old days, when obscenity laws were still being enforced in many places. For instance, the most sadomasochistic pornography, the genitals were always covered. Because if the genitals were covered, that wouldn't kick off a police prosecution. Number two, the use of the prurient interest standard. However it is construed in this new era, when the Supreme Court has taken two synonyms, lasciviousness and lust, and said that they mean different things, which is mind-boggling in and of itself. Whatever it is construed to mean, the reaction of jurors to material, whether they're supposed to be aroused or whether they're not allowed to be aroused, whatever the instructions of the court is, has nothing to do with the objective reality of what is happening to the women in the pornography. The third reason that obscenity law cannot work for us is that what do community standards mean in a society when violence against women is pandemic? When, according to the FBI, a woman is battered every 18 seconds and it's the most commonly committed violent crime in the country? What would community standards have meant in a segregated South? What would community standards have meant as we approach the atrocity of Nazi Germany? What are community standards in a society where women are persecuted for being women and pornography is a form of political persecution? Obscenity laws are also woman-hating in their construction. Their basic presumption is that it's women's bodies that are dirty. The standards of obscenity law don't acknowledge the reality of the technology. They were drawn up in a society where obscenity was construed to be essentially writing and drawing. And now what we have is a mass production in a way that real people are being hurt, and a consumption of real people by a real technology. And obscenity laws are not adequate to that reality. And finally, obscenity laws at the discretion of police and prosecutors will keep obscenity out of the public view. But it remains available to men in private. It remains available to individual men. It remains available to all male groups. And whenever it's used, it still creates bigotry and hostility and aggression towards all women. It's still used in sexual abuse as part of sexual abuse. And it's still made through coercion, through blackmail, and through exploitation. Now I'm going to ask you to do several things. The first thing I'm going to ask you to do is to listen to women who want to talk to you about what's happened to them. Please listen to them. They know how this works. You're asking people to speculate. They know it's happened to them. I'm going to ask you to make these recommendations. The first recommendation that I would like you to make is to have the Justice Department instruct law enforcement agencies to keep records of the use of pornography in violent crimes, murder, including sexual assault after death, to take note of those murders that are committed for sexual reasons, to keep a track, for instance, of suicides of teenage boys in the place of pornography in those suicides. They should keep track of both the use of pornography before and during the commission of a violent crime and the presence of pornography at a violent crime. And I want to say that a lot of the information that we have about what you were calling a correlation doesn't come from law enforcement officials. It comes from the testimony of sex offenders. That's how we know that pornography is meaningful in the commission of sexual offenses. And have the FBI report that information in the Uniform Crime Reports so that we begin to get some real standard here. Number two, get pornography out of all federal prisons. It's like sending dynamite to terrorists. Those people have committed violent crimes against women. They consume pornography. They come back out on the street. The recidivism rate is unbelievable. Not to mention that prison is a rape-saturated society. What about the rights of those men who are being raped in prisons and the relationship of pornography to the rapes of them? No one should be sentenced to a life of hell being raped in a prison. You can do something about it by getting the pornography out of prisons. Number three, enforce laws against pimping and pandering. Against pornographers. Pandering is paying for sex to make pornography of it. And a panderer is any person who procures another person for the purposes of prostitution. This law has been enforced against pornographers in California. Prosecute the makers of pornography under pimping and pandering laws.